Well, everyone, I wanted to get in here and make my own review of Creed 3, starring Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors and Tessa Thompson. And I actually, well, I'm kind of formal, so I jotted some things down here. The way I saw the movie was it was a bit of a callback and a bit of a nod to the original Rocky series from which this Creed series spun off. Now, before I jump into the parallels that I saw, I'm just going to say that I'm glad that they decided to keep the Rocky series going. However, nothing will ever replace those original three Rocky movies. Maybe you could throw Rocky 4 in there. The thing I didn't like about Rocky 4 was that Apollo Creed got killed, but also Rocky 4 was different. It was more mid 80s, it was more modern. The way Sylvester Stallone, the way his hair was cut, the way Carl's hair was cut, it was just, we were just transitioning out of the 70s and the early 80s into a different time. So the music was different. It was just more modern. But those original three Rocky movies, those were of the 70s. The hairstyles, the the wardrobe, the fashion, the cinematography, the way that it all looked. That was the 70s and 80s. And for me, I was born in the mid 70s and I grew up. The first Rocky movie I ever saw was Rocky 3. I have fond memories of that. And for me, those first three will always be special and they will always stand out above the others. Okay, now that that's out of the way, there were, as I was watching Creed 3, there were a lot of elements and a lot of themes that when I watched the movie, I was sitting and thinking, okay, this looks very, very familiar. Haven't I seen this before? So it seems to me that Michael B. Jordan, I think he wrote this. Whoever wrote this, they attempted to create a new storyline, which was the storyline between Adonis Creed and Dame Anderson. But they threw in many of the other story elements from the previous movies. So I'm going to run these down pretty quickly, and then I will conclude this video. So some of the parallels that I saw. Well, when the movie opens, Adonis is in what was supposed to be his last fight, and he retires on top, and he settles into a comfortable life with his wife and his daughter, and he becomes a bit domesticated. We saw that in Rocky 3. Rocky, after defeating Apollo, he rose to the top, and his goal was to go out on top. Of course, we know that Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T, challenged him, and he didn't get to quite go out the way he initially envisioned going out. And the same was true for this movie. Damien, Adonis's best friend Damien, when he got out of jail, he wanted his shot at the title. In Rocky 3, Clubber Lang wanted his shot at the title. The circumstances here were a little bit different. Clubber was the hungry hunter in the jungle. In this instance, Damien got out of jail, and he was a little further in his life, and he wanted his magical shot at the title, much the same way Rocky got his magical shot at the title. And I think much the same way Adonis went on his Cinderella run to being the heavyweight champion. Drago's hand, Ivan Drago's son, made an appearance in this movie. So, well, that's a spoiler if you haven't seen it yet. Yeah, Drago's son is in this movie, and they all seem to be cool. But Drago's right hand gets broken, and he he can't participate in the big fight with Felix that Adonis was helping to orchestrate. And in the original Rocky movie, the whole reason Rocky gets to fight Apollo is because the fighter that Apollo was supposed to match up with broke his hand. So they recycled that. They brought that back. And later we find out that that was orchestrated by Damien, which, again, that's a spoiler if you haven't seen it. There were two fights. The first one being tragic, and this one it was Damien against Felix. I'm going to get to the way Jonathan Majors portrayed that character later, but Felix got beat and he got defeated. He got beat pretty bad. In Rocky 3, Rocky got beat pretty bad by Clubber Lang. And then before coming back and defeating Clubber, and in Rocky 4, well, Apollo Creed died in the ring against Ivan Drago, and then Rocky came back and defeated Ivan Drago. So there were two fights in the movie. One was tragic and the other one was redemptive. So they used that model or that theme. Of course, there was a training montage where we saw both the fighters training and pushing themselves to their physical limits to prepare for the final fight. And so, again, there were a lot of elements that called back to the original movies. And those are just ones that I wrote down. I'll probably think of some others after I finish this video and upload it. That's how YouTubing goes. The new elements, I think Sylvester Stallone is on record saying that this movie is a little darker and a little less hopeful than its predecessors. But this movie has more of a street element to it. Adonis and Damien, they're running the streets, and Damien's carrying a gun, and it just has a different underpinning than the previous movies. And Damien goes off to jail, so we know that. Yeah, so we learned some more about the relationship between Apollo Creed and Marianne Creed, played by Felicia Rashad, as she's on her as she's transitioning. There's another spoiler. She's kind of talking to Apollo and recalling Apollo in those times when Adonis was an infant, or maybe slightly before he was born. So we see that he had a love child. He knew he had a love child, and he left anyway, which is that's a more modern theme, because I think we see a lot of that today. And I'll just leave that there. We see Adonis teaching his young daughter who's deaf. We see him teaching her how to fight. That was similar to Rocky 5, where Rocky taught his son Robert how to fight. And just like with Adrian, Bianca, played by Tessa Thompson, pleads with Adonis and tries to get him to see that they need to teach her other ways to navigate the world besides just fighting. So, but they did show a family. They did show a nice nuclear family, which I thought was good, similar to Avatar. They showed Adonis moving into ownership. So once his fighting career was seemingly over, he turned into a promoter. So he went into the ownership position, which I thought was positive, because when we think about athletes, particularly black athletes, we know them for their athletic prowess, but it's really, really good, and it's powerful when we see them move into the business side and the ownership position. So I thought that was powerful. He was actually he helped actually orchestrate the fight. Well, he was the promoter behind the fight between Drago and Felix. And when Drago's hand got busted up, he was the one who orchestrated and ushered in Damien to fill in, because it was a blockbuster big time fight and they needed someone else to put in there. So that was also reminiscent of Rocky the motion picture, because that's how Rocky got in there. They had this big time fight with Apollo, and they needed to put someone else in there. Well, that's how that all went down. And Adonis was in the ownership position and in the promoter's position this time. Let's see. Last thing I'll say, or one of the last things I will say, is that Jonathan Majors, I thought he played the Damian Anderson character very, very, in a very, very powerful way. We know that they were friends, but he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder coming out of jail. That's probably putting it lightly. But in the movie, we see him conspire against Adonis. And he's very much Clubber Lang from Rocky 3 in that he's a hunter and he's out to find his own way. And he just needs his shot. And he's been locked up for the last 20 years. And he's on the hunt for something. And he's going to do whatever it is he needs to do to get it. And in the movie, we saw that. But I also liked how in the fight scenes, the way Jonathan Majors sucked on his mouthpiece, and the way he had that very, very wily look in his eye. I thought that he portrayed the experience of a wily veteran, a wily tested veteran in the ring. So we saw that when he matched up with Felix. He was going to do whatever it was he needed to do, even if it was against the rules, to win that fight. And a lot of times in athletics, that's what you see more experienced athletes, whether it's boxers or basketball players, you see them do those things to younger players or younger fighters. They do things when the referees aren't looking. They slip in cheap shots and they slip in contact when the officials and the referees aren't looking. And I thought that Jonathan Majors, his Damian Anderson, really, really portrayed that. He was going to do whatever it was he needed to do to get the victory. Now, I will say that the fight sequences in the Creed movies are much more realistic than the fight sequences in Rocky 2, Rocky 3, and Rocky 4, and maybe the Tommy gun fights in Rocky 5. The sound effects, the punches the guys took, those fight sequences in the 1980s, they were just sensational, and, well, I guess sensational and a bit over the top. And the modern fight scenes are more realistic. So in terms of the ways that the fighters come out from their locker rooms, and then just the actual fighting between the two fighters. So I will say that in this movie it was more realistic, and it's noticeable from the 1980s Rocky movies. But then again, the spectacular and sensational nature of those 1980s Rocky movie fight sequences, that's what made those fun as well. The sounds, the trash talking, the continuous punishment, the punishment that would have killed any regular human, all of that. That's what made those fight sequences fun. One other thing I'm pleased to say, Carl Weathers followed me on Twitter after I made that video about him, so that was kind of cool. And I think I will stop this there. You kind of knew what was going to happen. You kind of knew that there was going to be I mean, you knew that Adonis was going to end up fighting Damien. You saw that in the trailer. And you knew most likely that Adonis was going to win. You knew that there was going to be a training montage. And you just knew. It's entitled Creed, but it's a Rocky style movie. No, I don't know how much further they can go with this. I suspect, well, this must be the last one because Adonis Creed is retired. There's nothing left for him to do. So he must be retired. This must have been the last one. His mother died. There can't be anything else left for him to do. So I would be surprised if there was another Creed film. Do I recommend this movie? Yes, I'd recommend going to see it. Even though I pretty much had a good idea of what was going to happen, emotionally, I got invested into the story. I think that's a sign of a good film, and I think that's a sign of quality writing. So I would recommend this film. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. This is Big Discussions 76, Entertainment and Media. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar. Please like, share, and subscribe, especially if you're new to the channel. If you want to donate something to the channel, that information is below in the description box. And also, please consider joining the Big Words LLC Newsletter. In addition to being a YouTube content creator, I'm also a writer myself with 2 blogs and with a book project in process, which also involves athletics. So I know a little bit about athletics. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Everyone, stay safe out there. And as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. And always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.